I'm Sarah Mackenzie. I am a mother of 6 and we homeschool all of them. I wrote a book called Teaching from Rest, A Homeschooler's Guide to Unshakable Peace, and I host the Read-Aloud Revival podcast. The first time I heard the concept of teaching from rest was, I was listening to Andrew Kern actually. He was giving this interview. I was cleaning out my 8-year-old son's closet. And I was pregnant with the twins. So pregnant with my 5th and 6th kids. I'm cleaning the closet. I'm kind of in this state of despair. And I hear him tell the interviewer that the number one thing a homeschooling mom should do is teach from a state of rest. I thought, this man has no idea what he's talking about, clearly. But it piqued my interest enough. I thought, this is so hard. This homeschooling thing, I'm so worried I'm gonna ruin something. I'm worried I'm not giving my kids every opportunity they could have, that if they're just relying on me for most of their education, there's got to be something wrong with this situation. I don't feel like I'm enough. And it was in the process of reading about rest and what it actually means to shed the anxiety and take on this work of homeschooling and raising my kids without all this angst and worry that really drove me just to find out as much as I could about it. And as I was learning about rest and what that means and what that could look like in the life of a homeschooling family, that's when I wrote the book. Teaching from rest is not always being calm. It's not simple. It's not taking the lazy way. One way I like to think about teaching from rest is that rest is this virtue that hangs between two vices, because a virtue always is in the middle of two vices on either end. So on the one side of rest, we have anxiety, which is when we're worried we're not doing enough. We have to be doing more. School should be hard. I'm not sure if we're doing enough academics or if my kids are going to get into college, all the stresses that we all have. And then on the other end is negligence, which is just as easy to slide into. And that's sort of like this idea of, I can't be everything for my kids, so I worry. Or my kids will just kind of get everything they need as long as we're all together. And I think the homeschoolers I talk to most often, they usually kind of slide toward both ends. And a lot of times they'll slide toward one or the other end of that more often than others. But teaching from rest is really taking on the peace that God has promised us right in between those two. So working hard. I like to think of the story of Jesus on the hillside, like feeding the 5,000, right? He's got this massive throng of people who are hungry. And his disciples come to him and say, we need to feed these people. They're all hungry. Send them away. That's how I feel like with my kids. Like every Monday morning, they come to the kitchen and I'm like, send them away. But what really needs to happen then is that I need to bring my basket of loaves and fish. And he didn't expect me to have to feed. He didn't expect the disciples to feed the 5,000. He said, bring me what you have. And they brought him this basket of loaves and fish, and he turned it into enough for the multitude. And in my homeschool, I know that teaching from rest for me looks like me bringing my basket, just the little bit that I have, and letting him turn it into something more beautiful than I could on my own. When we're talking about how to practically teach from rest, I think there's a couple things that I have found really helpful. The first is just to shed that comparisons. It's so easy. I think whether you're homeschooling or not, comparing yourself to other people is just what we all naturally do. And then you add in the social media life and and it just takes everything up a level. I often find myself, scrolling through my Instagram feed and looking at one woman who's doing tons of field trips and another one who's doing lots of nature study. Somebody else is reading all these amazing books or doing crafts, and I kind of combine them into this composite fictional woman and compare myself against her. And so the first thing I have to do is remember that I am not supposed to compare myself, kind of keep my eyes on my own work. If we remember our place, I think that really, really helps. I like to think of homeschooling kind of like taking care of a garden. We're given the seeds and we're supposed to prepare the soil and we're supposed to weed and water and tend it, but we were never asked to make the plant give a tomato. We were never charged with a miracle. If we remember our place, I think that really, really helps. And then the most practical thing that I've ever done in my homeschool Teach from Rest is to simplify and do less. Use less curriculum. Ask of myself less, ask of my children to do less, and just make sure that those fewer things that we're doing are the most important things of all. So we're in our 10th year of homeschooling now. And when I first started homeschooling, one of the things I did is I'd go to a convention or I'd read all these homeschooling books and I would think about all the things I wasn't doing with my kids. And I would kind of paint this idealistic vision of what I thought homeschooling should be. So I would think of myself, sitting on the hearth reading Robinson Crusoe with my children scattered around me, And homeschooling doesn't actually look like that. So I'd find myself really frustrated. I would also try to kind of overcompensate for what I felt like were my own weaknesses by buying more curriculum. You can always tell a woman's greatest weakness in her homeschool by looking to see how much curriculum she buys in that area. So I have every math curriculum on the face of the planet at home on my shelf. I think now, 10 years in, I realize that the materials and the curriculum don't matter nearly so much as the spirit in which I approach them with. And so it doesn't matter so much whether I use this history curriculum or that history curriculum. It doesn't matter so much that we use the best math curriculum on the market. It matters that I bring my own peaceful, restful spirit to my kids every day, that I smile a lot, that I enjoy them, and that they understand and recognize that I enjoy being with them and around them. I think that's probably the biggest difference in my homeschool, is realizing that the power of a really strong and successful homeschool doesn't lie in your books, it lies in your relationships. I have 6 kids, and my oldest as a teenager and my youngest as 3-year-old twins. There's a wide age span, kind of every age in between there. So normal homeschooling days look a lot like me taking turns with my big kids working one-on-one, while the other big kids are helping me with the younger ones, and then giving them each a set of independent work to do. I usually write them on spiral notebooks, very simple, very basic checklists of, spelling, math, all the things they need to do. And I'll be working with the younger kids and the older kids will come find me. We also participate in co-ops, love co-ops. I am an extrovert. Being at home with my kids all day can be really hard on me and my extroverted kids. So we find that being a part of a community is just really life-giving for us. So we make a lot of space and time for that in our homeschool as well. I think when I hear homeschooling moms most burned out, most tired or weary, a lot of time it's because they're not connected well with others like them. We weren't meant to be isolated. We weren't meant to all just be in our homes educating our kids by themselves. But there's this beautiful, vibrant homeschooling community, both all over the world and in our local communities, that we can really tap into. So at home, we are right now we're a part of 2 homeschool co-ops that we go to weekly. My kids' best friends are there. That's where we do a lot of our social interaction. We do a lot of Bible study groups, and the high schoolers do dances, and it's really fun, really vibrant. And it's also where I feel filled up a lot of times for the week ahead. And then online, I feel like in today's day and age, one of the great gifts that we have in technology is that you can find homeschooling families much like yourself anywhere you go, anywhere in the world, or even on a lonely, frustrated day at home, where you can jump online and find others who are like, I'm doing this too, I'm here with you, I feel the same way you do, kind of buoy each other up and strengthen each other. My favorite part of our Read-Aloud revival community when we tap into that online is the encouragement to just be confident and live fully into whatever season we're in right now. If you're pregnant and you're sick and you're in bed a lot and just reading with your kids and that's pretty much all you get to, then you can find other women who say, I've done that, it's fine, it works. If you are in a season where you're really struggling to figure out how you can meet the academic needs of a really advanced child, you'll find others like that too. That community, I feel like, is really, really imperative to feeling like you're a part of this connected world. For my kids too, I don't homeschool because I want to pull them out of the culture or pull them away from people. It's almost the opposite. I feel like when we homeschool, we're able to put them out into the world with people of all different ages and belief systems and ways of living like they wouldn't get if they were in a classroom situation. A few years ago, I heard Andrew Pudewa give a talk called Nurturing Competent Communicators. And in that talk, he speaks of the importance of reading aloud and memorizing poetry as the 2 most important pieces of helping your child become a good communicator. I heard Andrew Pudewa speak, and I got really excited about this idea that maybe reading aloud could have this big impact on my own family. And so at the time I only had 3 kids, I started reading aloud just a ton with them. And we read and read, and what I noticed are all the things he said would happen, like their vocabulary would be increased, they would do better in their written communication, they would be better conversationalists, and there would just be kind of a level of peace in our home. All of those were true, but I also discovered that we had this different kind of complexity to our relationships all of a sudden. This really beautiful bond was created between my children and myself and my husband as we were sharing these books together that I wasn't expecting. We would go on a hike and see this rock covered in moss, and it would remind the kids of how we had just read Anansi in the moss-covered rock. And they would start acting it out. And it was just this different kind of secret vocabulary, almost, like these secret jokes, inside jokes, really, in our family. Well, a few years into that, and I thought, I think I would like to start a podcast. I love listening to podcasts. This would be really fun. But I didn't know exactly how to get one started, but I thought I would love to talk about kids' books because reading aloud with my kids has been so transformational in my own home. And I thought I would love to talk to Andrew Pudewa, since he was really the one who kind of started that and lit that fire in me. And so I'm a little impulsive, and I decided to shoot off an email to Andrew Pudewa's IEW, the Institute for Excellence in Writing, and ask if he would be interested in being on my podcast for an interview, thinking he's not going to say yes. This is Andrew Pudewa, and I don't have a podcast. And then within an hour, his marketing director wrote back, Andrew would love to be on your podcast. I thought, I guess I better figure out how to start a podcast. And so the Read Aloud Revival started there. I thought it would be a few episodes, but what has happened is that we have just this sort of groundswell of people excited about reading aloud with their kids and who start doing it and realize that the relationships in our homes are they blossom in this beautiful, beautiful way. It helps our kids academically. It helps them cultivate this heart for others and slip into another man's shoes. It gives them this really inspired desire to be heroic in their own lives as they're reading tales, adventure tales. And you can't read The Lord of the Rings or The Chronicles of Narnia without being inspired toward this kind of heroic living. And then it bonds us together with our kids in this beautiful way. Jim Trelease, who wrote the Read Aloud Handbook, said that if parents could have a magic pill that would give their kids everything reading aloud gives them, they would stand in these long lines and pay exorbitant amounts of money for it. That's how much reading aloud does for our kids. So much. And so we started the podcast, and several million downloads later, we're just seeing these families reading aloud all over the world, and it has been such a delight to be a part of that community.